HR issues can kill you. One complaint against your company can turn your world upside down. And you spend way too much time dealing with HR when you should be spending your time on making a profit. You should talk to Bambi. With Bambi, get access to your own dedicated US-based HR manager starting at just $99 per month. They get to know you and your business while providing HR expertise and the personal touch you need and want. They're available by phone, email, and real-time chat, so onboarding and terminations run smoothly. Team members reach peak performance, and your business stays compliant with changing HR regulations. And with Bambi's HR Autopilot, you'll automate important HR practices like setting policies, training, and feedback. HR managers can easily cost $80,000 a year, but Bambi starts at $99 per month. Schedule your free conversation today to see how much Bambi can take off your plate. Go to Bambi.com right now and type in Accelerate under podcast when you sign up. It'll really help the show. Spelled BAM, BEE.com. Bambi.com. Type in Accelerate.
Welcome to Accelerate Your Business Growth with your host, Diane Helbig. Diane is a leading small business development and leadership coach, author, and speaker who is passionate about sharing valuable ideas, tips, and techniques with business professionals worldwide. Diane brings you the world's experts and gurus in all things business. Whether it's sales, structure, social media, planning, or plateauing, guests bring their expertise and energy to each episode. When growing your business is your focus, Accelerate Your Business Growth is the show to listen to. Got a topic or guest suggestion? Let Diane know. The goal is to make sure you have the information you need to move your business forward. Thanks for joining us. Settle in and enjoy.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining me today. Our podcast is sponsored by Audible.com. Audible.com is a leading provider of spoken audio entertainment and information. Listen to audiobooks whenever and wherever you want. Get a free book when you sign up for a 30-day free trial at audibletrial.com/businessgrowth. This podcast is continuing to gain recognition as a resource for business and entrepreneurs. From Inc.com to MSNBC's Your Business, Fit Small Business, Proven, and most recently, People First. Accelerate Your Business Growth is enjoying inclusion on lists of the best podcasts to listen to for small business owners, entrepreneurs, and salespeople. This is due in great part to the wonderful guests that I have had the opportunity to speak with over the years. These are folks who give of their time and their expertise to come on this podcast and have a conversation with me so that all of you listeners can do better things in your business. Today is no different. My guest today is David C. Baker. David is an author, speaker, and advisor to entrepreneurial creatives worldwide. He's written 5 books, advised over 900 firms, and keynoted conferences in more than 30 countries. His work has been discussed in the Wall Street Journal, New York Times, Fast Company, Forbes, USA Today, Business Week, and Inc. magazine. He lives in Nashville, Tennessee, and his most recent book is available at expertise.is. Thanks so much for joining me today, David.
I am very glad to be here. I've heard about your podcast and listened, and it's very exciting to be here. I just love this opportunity to have sort of a private conversation while all kinds of other people listen, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's going to be great. That's exactly right. Explain to me how you ended up living with the tribe of Mayan Indians, please.
Yeah, it sounds a little unreal to me too when I think back to my earlier life. I almost have to go back there to feel like it was actually real. So my parents were medical missionaries. So my dad did dental work and mom did nursing work. We also did some literacy work. And so They lived in Michigan, and when I was 4, we went to live in Costa Rica for a year to learn Spanish. That's where I learned Spanish. They just dropped me into a kindergarten, basically. And then when I was 5, we went there till I was 18. So we lived in this very, very primitive village. It was a Mayan tribe. No roads to speak of. No electricity. No plumbing. No stores. And so it was almost from another life. And I didn't really know that there was another world out there until I remember listening to Armed Forces Radio and hearing the Nixon trials. That was the first time I knew there was a U.S. essentially. And I go back there and visit a lot. Yeah, my first impression of the U.S., right? Great thing to remember.
Not very good.
Yeah, but so that's where I lived and grew up. I came to the U.S. I'm a U.S. citizen, but I didn't really come to the U.S. and live till I was 18. And
wow.
So it was very interesting life. I'm so grateful for it. It taught me so much about self-reliance, about different cultures, about how the U.S. isn't necessarily the center of the world. Yeah, there's a lot we could talk about there, I suppose, but there's just so much to learn from other cultures and the way other people do things. And that keeps creeping into my work and my perspectives as well.
Oh, I'll bet. It's such an interesting perspective that I have to believe is really got to be incredibly valuable for you, because you have had the opportunity to experience for a length of time different economies, different communities and environments, and see how people interact differently and decision make differently.
Exactly. Yes. And a different take on entrepreneurialism as well. Like even the word, we throw around the word marketplace, right? But growing up, a marketplace was a real marketplace. It was in the center of town, and the marketplace was on a different day of the week, because that allowed people selling their wares to travel from one city to the next and hit all of those marketplaces that were open weekly. In fact, one of the villages we traveled to regularly wasn't on a 7-day week cycle. They were on a 5-day week cycle. So we had to really figure out exactly what day we were getting there. But there was a real marketplace, right? And all of these terms that we take for granted, they were using them. And actually, when I go back to visit, I'll be back there in 2 weeks. When I go back to visit, not much has changed. Now there's this cell tower in the middle of the village, and everybody's running around with a cell phone because they skipped the entire wired phone generation. And there's electricity now, and there's some plumbing, but otherwise it's pretty unchanged. I love it, actually. It's such a great experience.
Gosh, I'll bet. So let's talk about let's talk about expertise, and let's talk about how it's viewed differently in different sorts of cultures.
Sure. Like in the U.S., when we use the word expert really in 2 different ways, I think. One is an expert who's also an entrepreneur. So they're bringing some skill to the table. It could be a product or a service, and they're doing it in some entrepreneurial fashion. So they're taking some financial risk. And then we have expertise that's not associated with an entrepreneurial risk, and that's somebody who maybe is a craftsman who works for somebody else, or it could be somebody who works on the client side who has a good salary and they're an actuary or something like that. The book that I wrote, and this is the first book that I've written of the 5 that I felt really, really passionate about. It's written to those folks who are selling their thinking. They're essentially monetizing their ability to match patterns. They see patterns as they look at the world through a pattern matching mask, so to speak. And then they apply what they learn through that pattern matching, and they make money from it. So I'm talking to entrepreneurs who are also risk takers as they sell their expertise.
Okay. So I'm one of those people, I think. So why do these folks, these experts, have so much trouble positioning their services?
Yeah, such a great question, because in some cases, these experts that you're talking about are actually in the business of positioning other people, right?
Right.
And yeah, and so it's particularly acute to think that these are the folks that can't do it for themselves. I mean, if you're not in the business of positioning other people, well, it kind of makes sense that maybe you can't do it for yourself. You need to hire somebody. But if you're in the business of positioning other people, why can't you do it for yourself? I think the primary reason for that is because we're all inside our own jar and we can't read the label on the outside of our jars. We're not that objective. It's why like an advisor can go into a firm and say things that everybody already knows, but they're saying it with a different level of objectivity and maybe a larger context. And so it means more to that situation. So that's the first reason we can't really read our own labels. We can't see what our unique strengths are. We're too hard on ourselves as entrepreneurs as well. And so we're always thinking about what can't happen or what hasn't happened rather than what could happen. That's one reason. I think, another reason is because we do know what the right decisions could be in order to be more successful as entrepreneurs, but we lack the courage to make those choices. We're just not sure. We could be paralyzed because of too many choices. More likely it's because we're so in love with the idea of opportunity that the notion of making a choice which might involve saying no to some opportunities is so painful for us. It's almost physically painful. Like the notion of leaving opportunity on the table in developed cultures is so painful to entrepreneurs that they just don't want to do it. They want to scoop up every opportunity they can and turn it into something. And as a result, they look back 5-10 years later and they look back over their lives and they realize that they've played around at a lot of things, but they didn't dive deep into something, right? They didn't do a podcast that came out regularly that found a significant sponsor, like I'm talking about you. And they were allured or lured away into all these other things that they might be able to turn into opportunity.
That is so true. And one of the things that I see these folks doing is they will start on something. I think they get to that place where they're sort of afraid to go ahead and pull the trigger. And so then they want to remake it. They want to, like, say it's a webinar series or something, and then it's never quite good enough. It's never really ready to put out there.
Tear it down, rebuild it. We can always make it better, right? Instead of just saying, listen, my 80%, what I think is 80% good is what other people would consider 100% good. Why don't I just sit here and make a lot of good money and quit starting over again? Like there's just something about entrepreneurs who have to fiddle with everything. And I mean, I'm talking as an entrepreneur, right? You obviously are as well. So I'm being self-critical here, but there is something about like at some point, just settle down and make a lot of money and realize that it doesn't, like, I forget exactly what that phrase is, like the enemy is the perfect is the enemy of the good or something like that.
Right.
That we just need to just knuckle down and do something and do it good enough. And also let some dreams die as well. I know that's sort of counterculture, but as you get older, as you get in your late 30s, 40s, 50s, you've got to start looking at all of these goals you had for your life and say, you know what? That's not going to happen. I'm going to double down on this and I'm going to be really good at this. Our world has changed. Everything around us has changed. And that's because of Google, really. Google has made it so obvious that there are too many areas of knowledge for any one person to be an expert in all of these things. The world will not allow us to be generalists anymore, except for a very few people, and I'm not one of them. I'm going to have to be really good, really deep at something, and then I can explore all these other areas in my personal life, my life outside of work. But in terms of what I'm getting paid for, I better know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I think that is really a huge point, because that's the other thing I find folks doing is they want to be all things to all people. And I think it's because they're afraid that it's that opportunity thing. They're afraid if they don't offer everything under the sun, they're going to miss out on that one thing, instead of just really focusing on something where there's a need and building a business and a world around that thing.
Right. And not being afraid of competition as well. Like I'm doing an event later this week and I'm inviting 6 of my primary competitors to come for free. And I'm going to use them to help work the tables and provide advice to other people. I'm going to promote their work. It's like there's so much work out there for us. part of what drives us to just grab all this opportunity and scoop it towards us on the top of the table is because we don't want somebody else to thrive. And that's a really backwards notion, right? The world is big enough for a lot of people besides me.
No question. And what I usually say to people is, there's business out there you don't want. So,
yeah, exactly.
Right? Yeah.
Right. But it might be a good fit for somebody
do.
else. Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Just because it isn't a fit for me doesn't mean it's not great business for somebody else who might have a different overhead structure, might have a different personality that's more of a patient coaching style than mine might be, and so on.
Yep. I completely agree with that. Okay, so when we talk about positioning, so you talk about horizontal and vertical, and I'm wondering if you can explain what the difference is between those two when it comes to positioning.
Sure. So vertical positioning would be if you apply your expertise to an industry category. So like maybe healthcare or tech or financial services or something like that. And it could be very, very narrow, like semiconductors, or it might be very broad, like business to business. So that would be vertical positioning. Horizontal positioning would be applying your expertise across those vertical industry categories, defined more by either the service offering itself, like maybe investor relations or public relations or employee management, something like that. Or it could be by a demographic, like I help you connect with the Hispanic audience or something like that. So those are the two primary ways that you would think about before you make a decision around positioning your firm. And most this varies a little bit based on the age of the person making the decision. Most younger experts are drawn to a horizontal positioning because it involves so much more variety. They get to touch so many different kinds of companies. And so they start there. But what stops them from being successful there, in other words, this is the big knot they have to untie to make it work, is their ability to actually reach and connect with their prospective customers. It's very difficult to find those customers when they're organized horizontally, because most of the world operates around what I call vertical water fountains. So if you think about other providers, or you think about the conferences that are out there, or the blogs that are out there, most of those are organized vertically. And so that makes it very easy to find your contacts. So people start usually with horizontal because it's more interesting. There's more variety. They're more immune to an economic downturn. There's fewer conflicts of interest and so on. Sometimes that works. Sometimes, most of the time, it doesn't. And they have to default to a vertical positioning. The reason they default to that is because it's easier to find their clients. But it comes with some other advantages as well. So, for instance, when you have a client in a particular vertical and that's your focus, when your client contact moves on to another job, historically, on average, they're going to go to another company in the same vertical of the job they just left, and they'll take you with them. That works out great. Another advantage is just like the vertical water fountains that I've already talked about. It's also compensated a little bit more highly. So that's sort of a nuts and bolts question. Like, if you are willing to focus your expertise, then you're faced with a question. Okay, how do I focus it? And that's the first thing you do is understand horizontal versus vertical. Then you'd make a choice there, and you may not stick with it, but you'd start there and you'd look at the work that you've done. Like, what makes sense? What could you turn into an established, declared sort of expertise? Because nobody's going to make it up, right? The expertise is going to emerge from something that you've already done successfully for several clients. Right. And from there, there are a lot of tough choices ahead, because the painful part for them is not choosing those two or three things where they've been successful. It's essentially saying no to all those other things they really enjoy doing that aren't in the new circle that they're drawing around their new business, so to speak.
Okay. So thank you so much for that. So would you then suggest that they focus somewhere and then in their personal life pursue things that are of interest to them? Like, is there a sort of a line?
Yes, I would suggest that exactly. In fact, I would recommend that they not pursue things in their personal life that have much to do with their work life. I really believe still in that, in keeping those two worlds apart as much as possible. And one of the motivations for maintaining that work-life balance is that you have these things that you focus on the outside, and they're so interesting to you that you get a little pissed off when your work life starts to intrude on that. So your work life is what, if it's done well, then there's a boundary around it, and you can do what you need to do to be effective within a certain amount of time. And it also provides the money that you will use to fund some of your personal interests outside of work. Mine are motorcycles, flying planes, helicopters, doing fine woodworking, photography. I'm very interested in some of those other things. They have nothing to do with what I do for a living. They have nothing to do with what I do for a living, but it affords me the money and the time to pursue those sorts of things. It also provides really good context for, like, I don't want to be some expert that's so out of touch with the world that like my advice doesn't make sense to anybody else but myself, right? So I want to read very widely as well. I want to read many publications every day so that I can stay in touch with the larger world and have an intelligent conversation with lots of people.
Excellent. That's so great. Thank you for that. So I had asked you a question before about how expertise is viewed differently. My next question is sort of related to that. It's about people choosing where they want to be an expert. Now, when I'm asking you that question, I'm asking it in a couple of different ways for me. I'm asking, is there a need to be geographically decisive? And another where for me is like where in their sphere of interest, I guess I'll say. So like for me, I mean, I advise small business owners, and a lot of that is about sales. So would I want to really, really focus on just the sales part, or as long as it's in the world of small business and not like doing career coaching or something?
Yes, I think you would. So if let's say I knew you really well personally and I came across somebody that I thought could use your services, there would be no confusion at all about how I would introduce you to this person. I would say, Diane knows a lot about small businesses, but especially sales in a small business context. And then I could stop right there, and maybe I would expand a little bit, but all of a sudden somebody has a very specific category to help you, to hire you or not, right? We want, the world is so full of opportunity that we want a very specific statement. And I think it should be like less than 15 words long, that will enable a prospect to come to your website and read that statement and self-select themselves either in the running or out of the running before they ever contact you. Because if they contact you, you are, before they've made an initial assessment of whether you're a fit, you are in love with opportunity. So you're going to be tempted to compromise, right? You want to eliminate those temptations. So let them self-select themselves in or out of the running. So you hire this advisor if you're responsible for sales, if you're in a small business setting, if you have been in business at least this number of years, if you are the decision maker, if you're willing to invest at least this much money and this much time. And then if none of those things are true, or if one of those things are true, then they will never contact you. Perfect. Then you don't ever have the chance to compromise. In terms of geography, there are some services or products that must be offered locally by definition. If it's a really heavy product, or if it requires some body, or like a utility has to be delivered locally, or healthcare in most cases. But otherwise, like from an expertise standpoint, it's better to think of it as like somebody should be willing to travel some of the time, whether it's the expert traveling to the client or whether it's a client traveling to the expert. in our world, like we no longer are protected geographically like we used to be, again, because of Google. So in the past, we could only travel a certain amount of time, so we had to find a local expert. Now that's not the case. And there is a lot of value in being viewed as an expert who is in demand outside of your local marketplace. There are exceptions to that, obviously, but in general, you want that to be a test that you can check off. Like, is somebody going to travel, whether the expert or the client?
Okay. That's great. Thank you. Thank you. That helps me out tremendously, which means I'm hoping it helps the listeners as well. So when it comes to applying their work, are there mistakes that you see experts making?
For sure. One of those relates a little bit to what we were just talking about, and that's accessibility. So in developed cultures, experts are by definition not as accessible as we as customer service oriented people think we should be. So if you are really accessible, and here's an example of this as an expert. So you say on your website, for a free consultation, click this link and somebody will be with you shortly, or complete this form and we'll get together for coffee. Well, experts don't do that. That sounds too much like somebody who's desperate for work or just loves talking to people. Plus, if there's travel involved, how in the world are you going to get together for coffee, right? That's not what experts do. You don't pick the brain of experts for free, or like constantly jumping or being the one who initiates the call versus asking the client or the prospect to initiate the call at a certain time at 4:15 instead of 4. So there are lots of little things you can do to shift the initiative burden back to the prospect or the client, because that's what experts do, right? Experts don't make cold calls. You don't have anybody doing that who's a real expert. Now, in undeveloped cultures or developing cultures, that equation is flipped in that experts are the most accessible people. They're the ones who sit in that marketplace that we were joking about at the beginning of this podcast and who anybody can come up and approach. But that has flipped. Now, when experts have to mixed with the unwashed masses, so to speak, I'm laughing as I say that, we either put them in different cars or we put them in uniform. You think about pilots in an airport. We want to be able to quickly identify, like imagine how you'd feel if the pilot came out of the plane before you took off or even up in the air and the pilot was in jeans and a t-shirt. Like it would send a jarring message to you, right? We want to see our experts differently. So because that's true, we just need to play into that and play the game of how our clients want to see us as experts.
I love that. That is so great. And I think you're right. I think it's interesting how all of this connects to each other. Like an expert who is thinking about that opportunity, that every opportunity is a good one and really does have that sense of, I need to take all business, is going to position themselves in a way that it does not show them as an expert. Shows them as a business owner,
right?
But doesn't show them as someone who really is an expert in their field. So
yes.
Really being able to establish yourself that way, I can see this means certain behaviors have to be
right
adopted.
And I think we have to distinguish between, like, we've always thought of like being in the product business or the service business as if there were only those two choices, right? And I want people to think that there really are three choices. There's a product business, the service business, and the expertise business. So my dry cleaner is in the service business. And if they don't treat me well, then I'll just there's three on the corner outside where I live in Nashville. It's like, it's not that emotionally difficult for me just to change dry cleaners, right? But an expert isn't in the service business. They're in the expertise business. And too many experts are actually cloaking their lame positioning by just over servicing clients, hoping that will sort of magnetize these bad clients to them. And it's not a good plan. The best experts do enough customer service to not be distracting, but people don't hire them because of their customer service skills. They hire them because of their expertise skills.
Right. That's great. That is great. I love that. Okay, I have to take a quick sponsor break, and then I have more questions for you. Accelerate Your Business Growth podcast is happy to be sponsored by Audible.com. Audible.com is a leading provider of spoken digital audio entertainment and information. They have over 150,000 titles to choose from, and you can listen to them on any device, including whatever you're listening to us on right now. If you sign up at our link, which is audibletrial.com/businessgrowth, you get one free audiobook and a 1-month trial of the service. Some examples of books you can listen to on audible.com are 80/20 Sales and Marketing by Perry Marshall and The Business of Expertise by our very own David Baker. So visit audibletrial.com/businessgrowth, explore the books that are of interest to you, and receive one free audiobook when you sign up for the trial. Today we're talking with David C. Baker about leveraging your expertise to your business. I think I just had that wrong, but leveraging your expertise so you can be successful in business. We'll say it that way. So let's talk about, we talked some about what's changed with expertise in the past couple of decades. Do you think, I look at it and I think, boy, Google is probably the thing that's had the biggest impact, or maybe the internet, on expertise and the way people do business with each other. Would you agree with that?
Yes, I think so. Because isn't there sort of an expectation that if I have a question, no matter how narrow it is, I can go to Google and find the answer within seconds, and the answer will be free? That's undermined the entire world of expertise, right? So, and then the other, I really like the fact that you threw in the internet as well. And when I think about the impact of the internet on expertise, I think that probably the biggest element that's changed there for us as experts is content marketing, because it used to be pretty unique. You would in fact, I started doing this in 1997, actually. I started to build an email list, and then every week these folks would get some email insight from me, and I figured if I gave them great insight, they would trust me enough with their email address. That was content marketing. And then it expanded so that we were trying to build organic traffic. So I would go ahead and publish this stuff, not just in an email, but on my website, and I would leave it ungated so that Google's search engine would recognize it, they could index it, and then they would send people to my website if that searcher had a question that they thought I could answer. So the whole advent of the internet and content marketing really changed all of this. But nowadays, everybody's doing content marketing, right? There's content mills. And I like to stand out in that world. You can't just generate good content. You have to generate brilliant content, and you have to have a point of view. You have to be willing at the end of somebody reading your stuff for them to say, wow, I really agree with that. That's fantastic. Or, wow, that's really lame. I don't want to follow this guy at all. Like that, you have to be willing to have a point of view that basically divides the audience like the Red Sea. And some of them are going to be more drawn to you. Some of them are going to be drawn or not drawn to you at all, or repelled from you. And so all of this has changed. Who knows what I have a feeling what the next phase of this will be, but none of us really know. So yes, it's changed, and we have to keep up with the times here, right? And that's partly why I write books, honestly. Even if no one bought them, thankfully people do buy them, but even if nobody bought them, I would write them just to figure out what it is I believe about something. Because unless I keep developing a point of view on something, then I'm just not going to have much to offer people. People want a point of view. They want a point of view almost more importantly than they want it to be guaranteed to be correct. They want somebody who has a perspective on something.
I find that fascinating. That is, wow. I never would have thought about it that way, but you say it and I realize that is exactly it. It's like, is this the hill you're willing to die on? Are you going to stand on this and say, this is my belief system, right? And I'm okay with sharing it because I really believe. I'm even more okay about, it's not just that I'm okay, it's that I'm passionate about sharing it because I really think it's a difference maker.
Right. Yeah. And in your field as a sales expert,
Yeah.
you may be drawn more to a particular theory of change or model of change about how the sales process unfolds. And you may have very clear perspectives about what should and shouldn't be done. There's still room for movement within your perspectives, but you have a clear point of view. And like if you go speak at the next TED, they're going to say, welcome to Diane, who has developed, and then you fill in this blank, and everything they put in that blank is going to have a very clear point of view that other people aren't going to share. And whether they agree with you or not, it doesn't matter. You cannot be an expert without having a clearly articulated point of view.
Oh, I love that. That is incredibly valuable. Wow. Okay. So you mentioned a minute ago that you have, guesses about how you think things are going to change or unfold or, develop, I guess is a better word. Do you want to share what you think is going to be valuable in the future?
Sure. But then if I could look very stupid here down the road, hopefully people will forget.
We're memorializing it right now.
Yeah. Hopefully they won't come back, and I'll be running for office someday and they'll pull this out and play it on CNN or something. I think the next phase is going to be a new level of personal trust in experts. So, and this is partly fueled by the fact that there's so much mistrust now. But I find myself as a consumer of expertise and somebody who likes to think about expertise and so on, somebody who likes to be an expert. I find that there are certain authors, certain speakers where I trust their approach to problem solving, even if they're applying that approach to multiple different areas. So like if X person writes a book or develops a new perspective on something, I'm going to buy it. I may not agree with it, but I'll listen to it very carefully. I'll give that person a hearing. And so personal endorsement, I don't mean like famous actor endorsement. I just mean experts who have a good reputation. They're going to have to protect what they endorse very, very carefully, and maybe only endorse 2 or 3 things every 5 years, but that will mean so much more because, like, I'm thinking of a Dan Pink, for instance.
Yeah.
Who endorsed this book, Business of Expertise. That's not why I'm thinking of him, because I've been a fan of Dan's for years, since I first invited him to come and keynote a conference I was doing. And then I've interviewed him and I've read everything he's written. He just came out with another book about timing. Unless something major happens, I'm going to buy anything Dan Pink writes, right? Another one might be Anne Lamott, who writes on so many different subjects, like on writing, on grief, there's about 10 of those people, right? I think that may be the next phase where individual integrity is curated so much more carefully than it is now. And hopefully we'll be listening to those people and not the jokes on social media who just have not had anything but a shallow thought their entire lives.
Yeah.
I'm just hoping that that's the next movement. I don't know if that's just an inkling I have. I don't have any idea if it's going to happen or not.
Well, I tend to agree with you, and I think it probably because I'm hoping that is the case. It's always an interesting thing when you see people faking it and convincing people that they've got the latest cure to whatever business issue people have, and people sink all sorts of money into it just to find out that there really isn't anything there, but somehow they're made to feel like it's because they didn't work the program
Exactly.
right? Yeah. That it's their fault,
right?
And drives me out of my mind, because I just think, wow, because there are good people out there. There are good people who really do know what they're doing and have the client's best interest in mind and that sort of thing. And so I'm with you. I mean, I'm really hoping that I think integrity needs a comeback, in a lot of ways, especially in business. I think it's so interesting because I look at this whole content marketing and the internet as contributing to both sides of that. It like contributes to
Right.
the downfall and contributes to the uprising.
Right. Yeah. The good with the bad. Right. But now
Yeah.
the signal to noise ratio is so out of whack. There's so much more
Yeah.
noise than there is signal. You just go explore Twitter for a while, for instance. That's an example. Or just
Yeah.
look at and even Google is getting a lot of this wrong. Like you can type a lot of queries into the search box, and they're going to point you to something that's
Right.
like, whoa, wait a second, that's just nonsense. Now, most of the time they're sending you to Wikipedia, which I think is a reliable place to send people, but in other cases it's just pretty lame. Like, and Google's business model is to make money. It's not to help mankind.
Right.
It's to make money, right? And so
Right.
there's always a little bit of suspicion in my mind about where all that's going.
Right. That's right. You have to remember that. That's exactly right. Like now I wonder about Mark Zuckerberg came out and said, in the future, you're going to want to spend less time on Facebook, and that's a good thing. And I'm thinking, okay, wait a minute, something else is going on here. And, you know, there's been a lot of things going on, but I think people are spending less time on it anyway. My personal feeling
Yeah.
that it's sort of run its course. But
yeah, the horses have left that barn, and it's sort of
yeah.
a little disingenuous to say that now you're going to want to spend less time on Facebook. Yeah.
Right. He's like trying to leverage something that has already been happening and say that he's doing it intentionally. But
Yeah.
So maybe it's a pendulum shift, or maybe it's growing up, right? Everything goes through these stages of growth, from infancy to childhood to teenage years to adulthood. And so maybe all of this is finding its way, because I think it's happened pretty quickly, and
Right. Yeah.
it's hard to keep up with.
Yep. I get a little nervous when almost an entire population gets excited about something. That's when the red light starts flashing for me. It's like, whoa, back this up just a minute. Have we really figured out the implications of all of this? And I'm partly that gets me in trouble as well, because I can be a contrarian when I shouldn't be, and that's unhealthy. But I do feel like most of the huge improvements that have come to mankind have come from people that most everybody else said had lost their mind at the moment. And at the moment of discovery, almost everybody thought they were nuts. And so I'm always listening for those small, still voices where somebody with a bigger perspective sees reality in a slightly different way. And while the majority could very well be wrong, the majority could very well be right as well. And so, there aren't any automatic answers there.
Right. And that sort of is the exciting part of it too, right? What will be next? What can happen? Which actually leads me to a question that I thought of before and then forgot, which is when we talk about expertise and integrity and this personal expertise sort of thing, do you think that video plays a role in that?
I think it does. I think that consumers, both professional and non-professional consumers, appreciate video a lot more willing than I have provided it to them. And one of the reasons, even though I think it's just subconscious, is that I think they believe that they have an easier job of detecting authenticity or rooting out inauthenticity by seeing something on video. Yeah. I have a better voice than I have a face, so I tend to do more audio than video. But I do think that's helpful. And video is more expensive to produce well. Generally I'm a believer in high production value, so doing video that way is pretty expensive. But I do think there's a great place for video, and I've been slower to embrace that than I should have, really.
Yeah, I embrace it. I think partly because of something that you had said earlier, that when we were talking about how you don't want all the business, and sometimes it's a better fit for someone else to be working with that client. And I think it can really be easier for people to identify someone who they feel a resonance with if they can see them, if they can see that their body language and how they communicate. I mean, I think communicating like we're doing right now is helpful as well. I just think that visual being able to look them in the eye sort of thing is can really make a difference. You get a feel for who they are.
I agree. I don't do a lot of video with clients, not because I don't like video, but because it forces me to sit still. And I like I'm very engaged in the conversation. I'm not thinking about anything else, but it's easier for me to be engaged when I'm pacing. So like sitting in one place with the video camera trained on me, or like my laptop screen or whatever screen, is difficult for me.
Yeah, I get that completely. That's interesting. So if you had one piece of advice, which I know it's hard to do, but I'm going to ask you anyway, that you could give to the listeners for how they can start or continue to build their expertise and position themselves as experts, what do you think that would be?
Okay. That's not too hard. I would say make a courageous choice, which means saying no to lots of other things. Make a courageous choice about where you're going to really finalize your expertise, and then list 20 topics where you need a more clearly articulated point of view, and then get smart in those. So that's maybe part A, B, and C. Maybe I cheated there, but that's really the answer, is make a courageous choice and then get smarter. Once you quit messing around and trying to dig a lot of small holes, once you're willing to focus and make a commitment to digging one deep hole, you'll be shocked at how quickly you learn, because all of your energy can be used efficiently there. And what comes with knowing, like I call it getting to know, as in KNOW, getting to know. And everybody defines it differently. For me, it's like standing in front of an audience of 50 or 4,000 people, doesn't matter, opening it up to Q&A at the end and eagerly awaiting any question anybody can ask, because I'm pretty sure I can help that person. I'm not afraid of a single question somebody might ask me. That's the power of know, that once you've tasted competence, you never want to go back to being incompetent, because it's terrifying.
Yeah. That's perfect. Thank you. That is really great. And thank you so much for coming on this podcast with me and sharing this information. It is so incredibly valuable and so needed to be said, and needs to be said repeatedly, but absolutely just really incredibly valuable information to my listeners. So I just appreciate you spending time with us.
Well, thank you. I've really enjoyed the conversation. It's been great. Even if nobody else was listening, it's been fun. And I know they are, though.
Right, exactly. They're listening. I was going to say they are absolutely listening. So please do me a favor and share with my listeners how they can get a hold of you, how they can get your books, everything you've got going on.
Sure. So my consulting practice is at Recourses, which is RECOURSES.com. But probably the best place to go, and the one that's easier to remember, is expertise.is. And that's it gives you a sample of the book. There's some interesting stuff about the process of writing it, what it cost in time and money. Some people are interested in that, and also links if you want to get a copy. It's a small site, easy to assimilate, and that's where I would send people, is expertise.is.
Fabulous. Thank you. And I would like to thank you listeners. You folks are who we're doing this thing for, as well as our sponsor. Please remember to visit audibletrial.com/businessgrowth to sign up for a free trial and get a free audiobook when you do. Continue to prosper and be curious. And until we meet again on another episode of Accelerate Your Business Growth, goodbye and good day.
Hey podcast listeners, my name is Paul O'Connor and I'm the host of the Rust Belt Rundown, a show that highlights valuable insights from manufacturing executives and business leaders in Northeast Ohio and beyond. We convene these leaders for candid discussions about business, regional happenings, industry trends, entrepreneurship, and more. With a wide range of guests and topics, there is something for everyone. Listen to Rust Belt Rundown for free on Spotify, Apple, or your favorite podcast app.